I cannot stress enough that these are not bad cars. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and part 2 of the Jaguar F Type buying guide. It was really good to see the amount of support in the comments from the previous video. If you haven't already watched part 1, check it out, I'll put a link up top. But thank you to all of you who put the time into giving some feedback and comments about other issues you've experienced. And today I want to flip the lid off of those and have a look at exactly what they entail and what fixes Jaguar have put in place for them, if any. If you're not already, please think about giving a like and subscribe. I genuinely really appreciate all the support the channel gets. But sit back, enjoy the video, let's see what's going on. So something that we've had an overwhelming amount of feedback in the comments for was the catalytic converters and the O2 sensors. And guys, thank you so much for being very polite in reminding me of that, because I don't know how I forgot. I've had to replace one of the cats on this car. I don't know why I forgot. Bank 1 has been replaced. Bank 2, I'm just waiting for it to happen. The sound of this exhaust is utterly phenomenal. When you put it into dynamic mode, open up the valves, it's fantastic, but it does come at a price. Those pops and bangs, the crackles that you hear, that's where unburnt fuel is igniting in the exhaust. So on the map for this car, when you come off the throttle, it cuts the spark but not the fuel. So fuel is still being passed through the engine, but it's not igniting. And those pops and bangs you hear is the fuel igniting in the exhaust system and creating those explosions. It sounds phenomenal. But a side effect of that is this does damage the cats over time. There's been documented cases of cats failing in as soon as 10,000 miles, and there's been documented cases of cats going on for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 miles. In a high performance car that's relatively highly strung, it's not surprising that you're going to have premature wear on parts. But certainly I agree, 10,000 miles is a bit early for catalytic replacement. Also, next to the cats, you've got O2 sensors or lambda sensors, and they measure the air-fuel ratio, the mix in the exhaust, and feedback alongside other sensors such as your MAF sensor, your MAP sensor, your knock or your crankshaft sensor, and they tell the car exactly what's happening in the engine and how much fuel it needs compared to the amount of air going through the engine. With that unburnt fuel we're just talking about going through the exhaust, the same thing can happen. It clogs up the O2 sensors. So there have been a fair few documented cases of the O2 sensors prematurely failing. Jaguar realised this, and in the later modelled cars, the late 2017, early 2018 onwards, they revised the map. So they actually nerfed the exhaust tone a little bit to extend the life cycle of the catalytic converters and the O2 sensors. Now, for anyone who's watched my video on the 6-month cost of ownership, I'll put it over there now, you'll know that when we were buying this car, I put a lot of thought into what age car I wanted based on the exhaust tone and various things that have been done. So this car actually doesn't have the nerfed map on it. So it's more prone to having the catalytic and O2 failures. Now, Jaguar have created a fix for this. They've released a software update that gets applied at point of service at the main dealer, which actually quietens down the exhaust tone. And there are so many cases online of people just putting notes, myself included, all over the inside of the car saying, please do not update the software. It was one of the main reasons that I wanted to buy this car, the theatre of the sound. A catalytic converter every 20, 30,000 miles, for me, doesn't feel like the end of the world. It's not my daily, it's a weekend car, and I bought it for its theatre, and it's just the pure raw sound. For that reason, I'm happy to run the risk of those parts failing. So yeah, there you go, catalytic converters and oxygen sensors in the exhaust. Two things that can fail very well documented occurrence of it online. Just be aware of it when you're purchasing and make an informed decision. So for this next item, we're going to talk about coolant pipes. And thank you again to everybody in the comments of the previous video who highlighted this. The Y piece that sits under the supercharger that splits the flow of the coolant. In the earlier models, the 2013 to the 2017, early 2017 models, they had a plastic, sort of like moulded Y piece under there, and it was that Y piece that used to fail. It would split, come apart, and you'd have coolant all over the inside of your engine bay, sitting under the supercharger on top of the block. Let's get under the hood and have a look so you can see what I'm talking about. So, smack bang down the middle of the supercharger, underneath this, on top of the block, so it sort of sits in the valley of the V8 or the V6 engine, is a rubber coolant pipe from back to front with a Y-piece splitter, and that is the part that is very commonly failing on the earlier cars. The revised model is a one-piece. It's rather than being moulded out of a couple of pieces, it's a one-piece solution, which has totally eradicated that problem. So the next really good piece of feedback we had in the previous video was around the rear differentials. I don't know if this is any different between the all-wheel drive or the rear-wheel drive only versions, but certainly a very good point that was made multiple times by a few people, and thank you for doing so, was the rear differentials and the service intervals in particular on the oil within the diff. There's quite a few documented cases on the Facebook groups and the internet forums of people changing their rear differential fluid, and on the magnetic plug in the bottom of the differential casing finding a concerning amount of shavings, or iron filings if you like, where those gears are meshing together. Naturally they're going to cause friction, which is exactly the reason you have the oil in there. But to find those shavings sat in the bottom of your differential, I can understand, would be quite concerning, and that's the exact purpose of a magnetic plug in the bottom of that differential. It is there to catch those shavings so that they're not cycling around in amongst everything, acting as a bit of a grinding paste. So what people are doing, and I think this is a really good idea, is people are actually shortening the service intervals on their rear differential. So rather than going for the Jaguar recommended mileage or time duration until changing that oil, they're changing it a little bit sooner to try and extend the life cycle and reduce the wear on the rear diff, which, preventative maintenance is a great idea, and I don't see any harm at all in doing so, and it's something I'll be adopting myself during the ownership of this car. I'm going to add in, as one of my own, I don't think I saw it in the comments of the last video, but what I'm going to talk about is the leather on the bolsters of your seats and the premature wear that you could experience on those. I've touched on it in my 5 things I would change about the F Type video. If you haven't already, go and check it out. But the driver's bolster in this car, so as I'm looking at it now, it's done a shade over 25,000 miles. And the driver's bolster looks like a car that's done 4 or 5 times that. The leather has begun to wear where your hip sits on the way in and out, I suppose, as people drag themselves in and out of the car, to a rate that I wouldn't really consider acceptable for a car that's 4 years old and done 25,000 miles. So just something to be aware of. It's not ideal, but it's not a deal breaker, so just keep an eye out for that. The next one is a very bizarre problem that seems to plague quite a lot of Jaguars and quite a lot of sort of high performance cars in general, and that is your battery voltage. Sounds weird, I know. Most car batteries are around the 12 volt mark when they're charging, about 14.4. But if your battery goes a little bit below that, certainly in Jaguars, the F Type in particular, they get really cranky with that low voltage and start throwing up all sorts of problems. People have reported the door handles not opening when you unlock the car, windows not dropping properly when you push the button, down to things like ABS or EBD lights coming on your braking system lights, or even throwing up rogue fault codes triggering an engine management light. And it's really sad to see people spending thousands of pounds at Jaguar or with their mechanic chasing these problems around the car, only to be told at the end it was a battery with a low voltage. This lives on a trickle charger for that exact reason. You know, I don't want that battery falling into a low voltage state where it's going to cause me all sorts of headaches with electrical gremlins. So if you are having problems and your battery's quite old or doesn't live on a charger, it's worth checking that as your first port of call before you spend a considerable amount of money chasing phantom problems around the car. Panel gap. I can see many Jaguar F Type owners shuddering, wincing or twitching at the eye at the sounds of those words. There are a lot of people talking about the panel gap on the Jaguar F Type. It seems to be almost like tectonic drift on this car. It just continually evolving and changing. In particular, the bonnet, where it meets the wings and the bumper. Check out my video if you haven't already about taking the front end off of this car and changing the headlights. I put a considerable amount of time into aligning the panels to make them all straight and proper, as you would have hoped they were out the factory. They've moved. I think panel gap is a serviceable item on these cars and something that you're just forever adjusting and taking care of. Don't know why. It's not like they're hand built like Aston Martins, so just a very strange feature of the F Type. People are talking about it all the time. Be careful if you're buying a car and the panel gap is crooked. It's one of two things: either it's been involved in an accident and put back together not very well, or it's the atrocious panel gap that these cars are renowned for. So thank you to all of you who gave incredible feedback in the last video and have reminded me of a few of the points I might have missed in the previous one, so thank you. I cannot stress enough that these are not bad cars. Every car that you buy, especially one that's, as I keep saying in many of my videos, we're poking on supercar performance territory in this, you're going to have some issues, especially when it's a new car to the market like the F Type was. They, being Jaguar, are going to be honing and refining the build and ironing out tweaks. And that's the exact point of facelifts of cars. They listen to consumer feedback, what the market wants, and they iron out issues which you're going to have in any new product you release to the market. Some of the things we've spoken about, for example, the diff oil, I wouldn't say that's a huge problem. If you're buying a car with a retail value of close to £120,000, if you buy a stacked out F-Type R or SVR, servicing your oil a little bit more frequently than the book says, I don't think is a big problem. You know, that's part of the territory of owning a car like this. You accept that there's going to be running costs and maintenance costs. Jaguar have been very good in their revisions in the facelifts in addressing these issues. And when you go online and you hear about a lot of these problems, of course you are. You know, I don't really often see people go on and say, my Jaguar hasn't broken down for 4 months. Whey! I know that is a ridiculous example, but you will quite commonly see people taking to the internet asking for help with their problems, which is absolutely a great function of forums and exactly what it's there for. So there we have it, guys. Part 2 of the buyer's guide or common issues with the Jaguar F Type R. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please think about giving that subscribe button a smash, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.